The words hit me like ice water on a summer morning. Grandma Betty, when do you think you'll die? I was standing in my kitchen, flour dusting my apron, pulling his favorite chocolate chip cookies from the oven, when my 18-year-old grandson asked me this question, with the casual tone most people use to discuss the weather. The ceramic cookie sheet nearly slipped from my hands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Excuse me, sweetheart? I turned around slowly, hoping I'd misheard him over the hum of the ancient dishwasher that had been acting up all week. Marcus leaned against my granite countertop, scrolling through his phone with one hand while picking at the fresh cookies with the other. He didn't even look up when he repeated himself. I said, "When do you think you'll die? Like, realistically. The doctors must have given you some kind of timeline, right?" The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. 28 years I'd been baking cookies in this same spot, watching grandchildren grow up around this very island, and never once had anyone asked me when I planned to stop breathing. My mouth went dry as cotton. Marcus, what kind of question is that to ask your grandmother? I set the hot pan down with more force than necessary, the metallic clang echoing through the silence. Finally, he glanced up from his screen, those familiar green eyes that reminded me so much of his father looking at me with something I couldn't quite place. Impatience? Calculation? It's not weird, Grandma. I'm just trying to plan ahead, for college and stuff. Mom said you've been having those episodes lately. Episodes? That's what they were calling my occasional dizzy spells now. Last month, I'd gotten lightheaded while grocery shopping and had to sit down for 10 minutes. The week before that, I'd felt faint during my book club meeting. Nothing serious, according to Dr. Martinez, just my blood pressure medication needing adjustment. But apparently, word had traveled through the family grapevine faster than gossip at a church potluck. Planning ahead for what exactly? I asked, wiping my hands on my apron though they weren't dirty. It was something to do with the nervous energy building in my chest. Marcus finally pocketed his phone and gave me his full attention. Well, Mom mentioned that you have that life insurance policy. The big one. And I've been thinking about starting my own business after graduation, instead of going to college right away. I could really use some startup capital. The room started spinning, but not from any medical episode. This was pure, undiluted shock. My own grandson was sitting in my kitchen, eating cookies I'd baked with love, discussing my death like it was a business transaction he was eager to close. You want me to die so you can start a business? The words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. He had the audacity to laugh. No, Grandma, I don't want you to die. I'm just saying, when it happens naturally, it would be nice to know there's something there for me. For my future. You're always talking about wanting to help with our futures. I was always talking about helping with their futures. Every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation, I'd been the grandmother who showed up with generous gifts and promises of college funds. I'd been setting aside money for Marcus since he was born, planning to help him with school, maybe a car, a house down payment someday. But this conversation felt different. This felt like he was measuring my worth in dollars and counting down to a payday. Marcus, you're 18 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. Why are you thinking about insurance money? He shrugged, reaching for another cookie. Mom said the policy is for like $500,000. That's serious money, Grandma. I could start a tech company, maybe get into cryptocurrency. You know how much money people my age are making these days? $500,000. He knew the exact amount of my life. Insurance policy. My hands started trembling, not from age or medication, but from a fury I hadn't felt in decades. How do you know about my life insurance policy, Marcus? Mom told me. She said you named me and cousin Sarah as beneficiaries when Dad died. She thought it was really generous of you. My late husband Robert had passed 3 years ago, and yes, I had updated my beneficiaries. At the time, it seemed like the loving thing to do. Marcus and Sarah were the lights of my life, my only grandchildren. I wanted them taken care of, if something happened to me. I never imagined one of them would start planning for my demise like it was a business opportunity. Your mother had no right to discuss my personal finances with you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She wasn't being nosy or anything. We were just talking about college costs, and she mentioned that I didn't need to worry too much about student loans because you've always been so generous. Then she brought up the insurance thing. The insurance thing. As if my death and the money that would follow was just another family asset to be discussed over dinner. I spent the rest of that evening sitting in Robert's old chair, staring at the family photos covering the mantelpiece. There was Marcus at age 5, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing he'd made of our family. There he was at 10, proud as punch in his Little League uniform after I'd driven him to every single practice that season when his parents were too busy with work. At 15, beaming next to the car I'd helped him buy for his 16th birthday. When had that sweet little boy turned into someone who could casually ask his grandmother when she planned to die so he could access her life insurance money? I'm Elizabeth Morrison, though everyone calls me Betty. I'm 73 years old, and until yesterday, I thought I was living a pretty good life in my small town of Maplewood, Vermont. I raised 2 children mostly on my own after my first husband died in a factory accident when the kids were young. I worked double shifts at the textile mill for 15 years to keep food on the table and clothes on their backs. When I married Robert 25 years later, it felt like life was finally giving me a break. Robert was a good man, a patient man who understood that my children would always come first. He helped me put both kids through college, walked my daughter Linda down the aisle when she married, and was the grandfather Marcus and Sarah never had from their other side. We built a comfortable life together, not wealthy, but secure. The kind of security that comes from decades of careful saving, smart investments, and a hefty life insurance policy, Robert insisted we both maintain. You never know what's around the corner, Betty, he used to say. I want to make sure you're taken care of if something happens to me, and the grandkids too. The grandkids. Robert adored Marcus and Sarah. He taught Marcus to fish, helped him with math homework, attended every school play and soccer game. When Robert died suddenly of a heart attack 3 years ago, Marcus cried harder than anyone at the funeral. He gave a beautiful eulogy about how Grandpa Robert had been more of a father figure to him than his own dad, who'd divorced Linda when Marcus was 12 and promptly moved across the country to start a new family. That's why yesterday's conversation felt like such a betrayal. The Marcus who'd sobbed at his grandfather's funeral wouldn't have asked when I was planning to die so he could collect insurance money. Would he? But as I sat there replaying the conversation, other moments started clicking into place. The way Marcus had been asking about my health lately, always with a concerned expression that now seemed almost calculating. The questions about my medications, my doctor's appointments. Whether I'd updated my will recently, I'd thought he was being a caring grandson. Now I wondered if he was conducting some kind of morbid inventory. Then there was the conversation 2 weeks ago when he'd asked if I'd ever considered moving to one of those nice senior.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Communities, where I'd have people to look after me. At the time, I'd laughed it off. I was perfectly capable of looking after myself, thank you very much. I still drove, still cooked, still maintained my own home and garden. But now I wondered if Marcus was hoping I'd move somewhere with higher mortality rates. The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our recent text conversations. Most of them were normal grandmother-grandson exchanges. Pictures of meals I was cooking, updates about my book club, questions about his part-time job at the electronics store. But scattered throughout were his health-related inquiries that now seemed less innocent. How are you feeling today, Grandma? Any more dizzy spells? Did the doctor say anything new about your blood pressure? You're taking all your medications on time, right? I worry about you living alone. At the time, these messages had warmed my heart. What a thoughtful grandson, caring so much about his elderly grandmother's well-being. Now they read like someone monitoring a situation, waiting for developments. I needed to talk to someone about this, but who? Linda was Marcus's mother. Even if she hadn't been the one to tell him about the life insurance policy, she was hardly going to be objective about her son's behavior. My neighbor Helen was a good friend, but she tended to gossip, and this was too personal to risk becoming neighborhood entertainment. That's when I remembered Janet Walsh, my book club friend who dealt with a similar situation with her own family a few years back. Her son had started pressuring her to make him power of attorney, ostensibly to, quote, help manage her affairs, but really to gain access to her accounts. Janet had confided in me about how hurt and betrayed she'd felt, how difficult it was to accept that someone you'd loved and supported could view you primarily as a financial opportunity. I called Janet the next morning. "Betty, I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said after I'd explained the situation. "It's heartbreaking when you realize that someone you love might be seeing dollar signs instead of the person who raised them. But maybe I'm overreacting," I said, pacing around my kitchen. "Maybe Marcus was just being practical. Young people today are more open about discussing money and planning than we were at their age. Betty, honey, there's a difference between financial planning and asking your grandmother when she expects to die so you can access her life insurance money. That crosses a line." Janet was right, and I knew it, but admitting it out loud felt like acknowledging that I'd failed somehow as a grandmother. How had I raised a boy who could look at me and see a payout instead of a person? "What did you do about your son?" I asked. "I changed my will," Janet said without hesitation. "And I made sure he knew about it. Sometimes people need to understand that actions have consequences, even when those people are your own family." After I hung up with Janet, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and really thought about my situation. Marcus wasn't just any 18-year-old. He was my grandson, my own blood. But he was also someone who'd looked me in the eye and asked when I was planning to die so he could collect $500,000. Someone who knew the exact amount of my life insurance policy and had apparently been discussing it with his mother. The more I considered it, the more I realized this wasn't just about Marcus. Linda had to have known how her conversation with him about my finances would sound. She had to have understood that telling an 18-year-old about his grandmother's life insurance policy might plant certain ideas in his head. Either she was incredibly naive, or she was complicit in some way. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my lawyer. Margaret Stevens had handled Robert's estate after he died, and she'd helped me update my will and beneficiary information. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd built a successful practice in our small town by being direct, honest, and fiercely protective of her clients' interests. "Mrs. Morrison, how nice to hear from you," Margaret said when her secretary connected the call. "I hope you're doing well." "I'm doing fine, Margaret, but I need to discuss some changes to my will and life insurance beneficiaries." "Of course. Can you tell me what kind of changes you're considering?" I took a deep breath. "I want to remove my grandson Marcus as a beneficiary from my life insurance policy." There was a pause. "I see. May I ask what's prompted this decision?" I told her about Marcus's question, about the conversation with Linda, about the growing sense that my family was viewing my eventual death as a financial windfall rather than a loss. Margaret listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of understanding. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm sorry you're dealing with this," she said when I finished. "Unfortunately, it's more common than you might think. People sometimes begin to view elderly family members differently when they know there's money involved. So you don't think I'm overreacting? Not at all. Your instincts are telling you something important, and you should listen to them. The fact that your grandson asked you directly about when you expect to die, and that he mentioned your life insurance policy specifically, suggests a concerning mindset. But he's only 18, I said, feeling the need to defend him even as I was seeking to disinherit him. Maybe he doesn't understand how hurtful his words were. Mrs. Morrison, 18 is old enough to understand that asking your grandmother when she plans to die so you can access her money is inappropriate and hurtful. Age isn't an excuse for that kind of behavior. Margaret was right. I'd been making excuses for Marcus, trying to rationalize his words because I loved him and wanted to believe the best of him, but love didn't require me to ignore red flags or accept disrespectful treatment. "What would removing him as a beneficiary involve?" I asked. "It's quite straightforward. We'll contact your insurance company and file the necessary paperwork to change your beneficiaries. You can add other people, charities, or simply remove him and leave his portion to your other beneficiary." And he would find out about this change? Not unless you tell him, or unless something happens to you and the policy pays out. Beneficiary information is private. The idea of changing my will without telling Marcus felt strange, almost sneaky. But then I remembered his casual tone when he'd asked about my death timeline, the way he'd mentioned my life insurance money like he was already counting it. Maybe a little strategic privacy was exactly what this situation called for. "I'd like to schedule an appointment," I said. "How about tomorrow afternoon? Say, 2 o'clock?" "That works perfectly." After I hung up with Margaret, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days. Relief. I was taking action. I wasn't just sitting around feeling hurt and betrayed. I was protecting myself and making sure my assets would go to people who valued me as a person, not a payout. But the relief was mixed with sadness. Changing my will meant acknowledging that my relationship with Marcus had fundamentally shifted. The little boy who used to run to me for hugs and cookies had become someone I needed to protect myself from. The grandson I'd planned to help launch into adulthood was someone I could no longer trust with knowledge of my financial affairs. That evening, Marcus called to check on me. "Hey, Grandma, just wanted to see how you're feeling today. Any more of those dizzy spells?" "I'm feeling fine, sweetheart," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Good, good. Hey, I've been doing some research about that business idea I mentioned. There are some really interesting opportunities in the tech space right now. Young entrepreneurs are making millions." "That sounds exciting," I said, though my stomach churned at the subtext. "Yeah, I think I could really make something of myself if I had the right startup capital. You know, when the time comes." When the time comes. Such a delicate way to refer to my death. "Marcus, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," I said carefully. "I want you to know that asking someone when they expect to die isn't appropriate, even if you're family." There was a pause. "I wasn't trying to be inappropriate, Grandma. I was just being practical. I thought you'd appreciate that I'm thinking ahead instead of just assuming everything will work out. Thinking ahead is fine, but there are better ways to plan for your future than waiting for your grandmother to die." "I'm not waiting for you to die," he said, and I could hear irritation creeping into his voice. "I'm just saying, when it happens naturally, it would be nice to know there's some security there. You've always said you wanted to help with our futures." I had always said that. But I'd meant helping them build their futures while I was alive to see them succeed, not providing them with death benefits to fund their dreams. "We'll talk more about this later," I said. "I need to go start dinner." "Okay, Grandma, love you." "Love you too," I said automatically, but the words felt strange in my mouth. After we hung up, I sat in Robert's chair again and thought about love. I did love Marcus. I'd loved him since the moment Linda placed him in my arms as a newborn. I'd loved him through sleepless nights when I babysat him as a toddler, through helping him with homework as a child, through the awkward teenage years when he was more interested in video games than grandparents. But love, I was learning, wasn't the same thing as trust. And trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. The next afternoon, I drove to Margaret's office with a mixture of determination and sadness. The law firm was housed in a converted Victorian home on Main Street, the kind of place that felt both professional and welcoming. Margaret's office was on the second floor, filled with law books and family photos, including several of her own grandchildren. "Thank you for seeing me so quickly," I said as I settled into the chair across from her desk. "Of course. I've pulled your file and reviewed your current beneficiary arrangements." She opened a folder and spread out several documents. "Currently, you have Marcus and Sarah listed as equal beneficiaries on your life insurance policy, which has a death benefit of $500,000. Hearing the number out loud made my chest tighten. $500,000 was a substantial amount of money, especially for young people just starting their adult lives. No wonder Marcus had perked up when Linda mentioned it. "I want to remove Marcus completely," I said. "I want Sarah to receive the full amount." "Are you sure about that?" "It's a significant change, and it's permanent unless you decide to modify it again later." I thought about Sarah, my 20-year-old granddaughter who was currently in her junior year of college. Sarah had never once asked about my health in a calculating way. She called to tell me about her classes, her friends, her part-time job at the campus library. When she visited, she wanted to hear stories about her late grandfather, help me in the garden, or watch old movies together. Sarah treated me like a beloved grandmother, not a future inheritance. I'm sure, I said. Sarah deserves it. She values me as a person, not as a financial resource. Margaret nodded and began filling out the necessary forms. We'll also need to update your will to reflect this change. Currently, Marcus is listed as inheriting a portion of your estate as well. Remove him from that too, I said without hesitation. Everything goes to Sarah. What about your daughter Linda? Would you like to leave anything to her? I considered this. Linda was Marcus's mother, and she'd been the one to tell him about my life insurance policy in the first place. How much of his entitled attitude was coming from her? How much had she influenced his thinking about my money? I'll leave Linda the house, I said finally. She can sell it or keep it, whatever she wants. But the investments, the savings, the insurance money, all of that goes to Sarah. Margaret spent the next hour walking me through the paperwork, explaining each change and its implications. By the time we finished, I had effectively disinherited Marcus from the bulk of my estate while ensuring that Sarah would be well provided for. When will these changes take effect? I asked as I signed the final document. As soon as I file the paperwork with the insurance company and get your new will notarized, which should be within the week. Are you planning to tell your family about these changes? I thought about this. Part of me wanted to call Marcus immediately and tell him exactly why I'd removed him from my will. I wanted him to understand that actions have consequences, that treating your grandmother like a business opportunity would cost him dearly. But another part of me wanted to keep this information private, at least for now. Not immediately, I said. I want to see if Marcus's behavior changes on its own, or if it gets worse. That's probably wise. Sometimes people reveal their true character when they think they have something coming to them. As I drove home from Margaret's office, I felt lighter than I had in days. I'd taken control of the situation instead of just worrying about it. I'd protected my assets and ensured they would go to someone who truly deserved them. Most importantly, I'd sent a message, even if Marcus didn't know it yet. I would not tolerate being treated like a walking ATM by my own family, but the satisfaction was tempered by sadness. Changing my will felt like acknowledging the death of something precious, the relationship I'd thought I had with my grandson. The Marcus I'd loved and spoiled and worried about for 18 years might never have existed. Maybe he'd always been calculating, always been focused on what he could gain from our relationship, or maybe something had changed recently. Some shift in his priorities or values that had turned him into someone I didn't recognize. Either way, I was done pretending that love alone was enough to sustain a relationship. Marcus wanted to treat me like a business opportunity? Fine. He could learn how business really worked. When you damage a relationship, you lose the benefits that come with it. That evening, Linda called. Hi, Mom, how are you feeling? Marcus mentioned you seemed a little off when he talked to you yesterday. I'm feeling fine, I said carefully. Why would Marcus think I seemed off? He said you got upset when he asked about your health and your future plans. He was just concerned about you, Mom. We all are. Future plans. Such a euphemistic way to describe our conversation about my death and his inheritance. Linda, did you tell Marcus about my life insurance policy? There was a pause. Well, yes, but not in a bad way. We were talking about college funding, and I mentioned that you've always been so generous with the kids. I thought it was nice that you'd included them as beneficiaries. And you don't see anything inappropriate about an 18-year-old knowing the details of his grandmother's life insurance policy? Mom, he's not just any 18-year-old. He's family. And he's trying to plan for his future. I think it's mature of him to think ahead instead of just assuming everything will work out. There it was again, that phrase about thinking ahead, planning for the future. As if my death was just another item on Marcus's to-do list. Linda, your son asked me when I expect to die so he can access my insurance money. Do you really think that's mature? He didn't mean it like that, Mom. Marcus loves you. He's just practical. Young people today are more comfortable discussing money and death than we were. It doesn't mean he wants you to die, but he's comfortable with the idea of profiting from my death. That's not fair. The money is meant to help him build his future. That's what you wanted when you named him as a beneficiary. Linda was defending Marcus, which I'd expected. But hearing her rationalize his behavior made me realize that this attitude didn't develop in a vacuum. Linda had clearly influenced Marcus's thinking about my money, possibly without even realizing how her words would sound to an 18-year-old. Linda, I need you to understand something. My life insurance policy is meant to provide security, not fund business ventures. If Marcus is already counting on that money for his startup dreams, he's going to be disappointed. What do you mean? I hadn't planned to tell Linda about the changes to my will, but her defensive attitude was pushing me toward transparency. I mean that naming someone as a beneficiary is a privilege, not a right, and privileges can be revoked if they're taken for granted. There was a long silence. Mom, are you saying you're thinking about changing your will? I'm saying that I won't tolerate being treated like a bank account with legs. Marcus needs to understand that respect and love can't be bought, and they can't be assumed. This is ridiculous, Linda said, her voice rising. Marcus made one comment that you're blowing completely out of proportion. He's a good kid, Mom. He loves you. Good kids don't ask their grandmothers when they plan to die so they can access inheritance money. He was just being practical. No, Linda. He was being callous. There's a difference. We ended the call without resolving anything, which didn't surprise me. Linda was going to defend her son no matter what he'd said or how he'd said it. But the conversation had confirmed my suspicions about where Marcus's attitude was coming from. Linda had clearly been discussing my finances with him in ways that made him feel entitled to my money. The next few days were quiet. No calls from Marcus, no visits, no text messages asking about my health. I wasn't sure if this was because Linda had talked to him about our conversation, or if he was sulking because I'd called out his inappropriate question. Either way, the silence felt ominous. On Thursday evening, I was watering my tomato plants when I heard a car pull into my driveway. It was Marcus, but he wasn't alone. A young woman I didn't recognize was with him, someone around his age with purple hair and multiple piercings. They both got out of his car and walked toward my garden. "Hey, Grandma," Marcus said, his tone friendlier than I'd expected. "I wanted to introduce you to my girlfriend, Cassie." "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Morrison," Cassie said politely. "Marcus talks about you all the time." "It's nice to meet you too, dear," I said, though I was puzzled by this unexpected visit. Marcus rarely brought friends or girlfriends around, and he'd never mentioned anyone named Cassie before. "So, Grandma, I've been thinking about what you said the other day," Marcus continued, "about planning for the future and being more respectful. You're right. I shouldn't have asked about your timeline. That was insensitive." I blinked in surprise. This was not the conversation I'd expected to have. "I appreciate you saying that, Marcus. The thing is, I really have been thinking about my future, and I realize I need to be more proactive about it. Cassie and I have been talking about starting a business together. She's really good with social media marketing, and I know tech stuff. We could make a really good team." "That sounds interesting," I said carefully, wondering where this was going. "The problem is startup costs," Cassie chimed in. "Everything costs so much these days. Equipment, software, marketing, legal fees to incorporate. We've been trying to figure out how to get the capital we need." There it was. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to ask for money. Marcus had brought his girlfriend along as backup, thinking I'd be more likely to open my wallet if I met her and liked her. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked. "Well, ideally about $30,000 to really do it right," Marcus said. "I know that sounds like a lot, but Grandma, we could really make something of this. And you've always said you wanted to help with our futures." $30,000. It was a substantial amount, but it was also far less than the life insurance payout he'd been anticipating. I wondered if this was his way of trying to access my money while I was still alive, perhaps thinking that if I gave him startup funds now, I'd be less likely to remove him from my will later. "That is a lot of money," I said. "What kind of business are you planning to start?" For the next 20 minutes, Marcus and Cassie enthusiastically explained their vision for a social media consulting company that would help small businesses improve their online presence. It wasn't a terrible idea, and they'd clearly done some research. But their business plan was vague, their market analysis was superficial, and their financial projections were wildly optimistic. More importantly, this felt like another version of the same conversation we'd had a few days earlier. Marcus was still viewing me primarily as a source of funding for his dreams. The only difference was that now he was asking for money while I was alive, instead of waiting for me to die. "It sounds like you've put some thought into this," I said when they finished their presentation. "But $30,000 is a significant investment. I'd need to see a detailed business plan, market research, financial projections. Have you approached any banks or investors?" Marcus's face fell slightly. "Banks won't lend to people our age without collateral. And investors want to see a track record we don't have yet. That's why we need family support to get started." Family support, another euphemism for my money. "I'll need to think about this," I said. "It's not the kind of decision I can make on the spot." "Of course," Cassie said quickly. "We totally understand. We're not in a huge rush or anything." "Actually, we kind of are," Marcus said, shooting her a look. "There's a really good opportunity to get into this market right now, but if we wait too long, it'll be saturated. Sometimes you have to take risks when you're young, right, Grandma?" There it was again, the subtle pressure, the suggestion that I should take risks with my money to fund his dreams, the implication that if I didn't help him now, I'd be responsible for his missed opportunity. "Marcus, I've taken plenty of risks in my lifetime," I said firmly. "Most of them were calculated risks based on careful planning and research. That's how your grandfather and I built the security we had." I know. I just mean you have the resources to help us, and we have the energy and ideas to make this work. It could be a great partnership." Partnership? As if my providing $30,000 while he and Cassie did the work was somehow an equal arrangement. After they left, I called Margaret again. "I'm glad you called," she said. "I was just about to contact you. The paperwork has been filed and your beneficiary changes are now official. Marcus has been completely removed from your life insurance policy and your will." "Good," I said, "because he just asked me for $30,000 to start a business." I told Margaret about the visit, about the business proposal, about the subtle pressure to invest in their dreams. "It sounds like he's trying to access your money while you're alive instead of waiting for your death," Margaret observed. "That's actually worse in some ways. At least before, he was waiting for a natural event. Now he's actively trying to separate you from your assets." That's exactly how it felt. Like he's found a new angle to approach the same goal. "What are you going to tell him?" "I'm going to say no, but I'm also going to do something else. I want to set up a trust for Sarah that Marcus can't access or contest. If something happens to me tomorrow, I want to make sure Sarah gets everything without any interference from Marcus or Linda." That's a wise precaution. Family money disputes can get very ugly, especially when someone feels entitled to assets they're not receiving. The next morning, I was having coffee in my garden when Sarah called. "Hi, Grandma. How are you doing? I feel like we haven't talked in forever." "I'm doing well, sweetheart. How are classes going?" "Really good. I made Dean's List again this semester. And I got a promotion at the library. They're making me head student supervisor." "That's wonderful, Sarah. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Grandma. Hey, I was thinking about coming home for a long weekend soon. Would that be okay? I miss you. And I miss your cooking." This was the difference between Sarah and Marcus. Sarah called to share good news, to express affection, to plan a visit because she missed me. She didn't call to ask about my health in concerning ways, or to propose business ventures that required my financial backing. "I would love that," I said. "When were you thinking?" "Maybe next weekend. I don't have any major assignments due, and I could use a break from campus life." "Perfect. I'll make your favorite pot roast." "Actually, Grandma, can I ask you something?" My heart skipped a beat. Was Sarah about to ask for money too? Had Linda talked to her about my finances the way she'd talked to Marcus? "Of course, dear. Mom mentioned that Marcus has been bothering you about money or something. She was pretty vague about it, but she seemed upset. Is everything okay?" Relief flooded through me. Sarah wasn't calling to ask for money. She was calling to check on my well-being. "It's nothing for you to worry about," I said. "Just some family disagreements about priorities and values." "Well, if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." I know Marcus can be kind of self-centered sometimes. He doesn't always think about how his words affect other people. Self-centered. That was a diplomatic way to describe someone who'd asked his grandmother when she expected to die so he could access her insurance money. Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot to me. After we hung up, I felt a renewed sense of confidence in my decision to leave everything to Sarah. She was mature, considerate, and genuine in her affection for me. If something happened to me tomorrow, she would grieve my loss, not celebrate her gain. But I also realized that Marcus wasn't going to give up easily. His request for startup money was probably just the beginning. Now that he knew I was reluctant to fund his business dreams, he might escalate his efforts. And Linda, despite her defensive attitude, might start pressuring me as well once she realized I was serious about changing my will. I needed to be prepared for whatever came next, because something told me this family drama was just getting started. I was arranging fresh daisies in Robert's favorite vase when the doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession. The urgent sound made my hands shake, and I nearly dropped the ceramic piece he'd bought me for our 10th anniversary. Through the front window, I could see Marcus pacing back and forth on my porch, his phone pressed to his ear, gesticulating wildly as he spoke to whoever was on the other end. When I opened the door, his face was flushed red, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool October air. "Grandma, we need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "Now." "Marcus, what's gotten into you? You look upset." He whirled around to face me, his green eyes blazing with an anger I'd never seen before. "Mom told me what you said to her. About changing your will. About taking away my inheritance." My stomach dropped like a stone, Linda had told him. Despite my careful words about privileges being revoked, despite my attempts to handle this situation with some discretion, she'd run straight to Marcus and shared our private conversation. "Your mother had no right to discuss my personal financial decisions with you," I said, keeping my voice steady though my heart was hammering. "No right? No right?" Marcus's voice cracked with indignation. "Grandma, we're talking about my future here, my inheritance, money that's supposed to help me build a life. It's not your inheritance, Marcus, it's my money, and I can leave it to whomever I choose." "But you promised." He was almost shouting now, his face growing redder by the second. "When Grandpa Robert died, you said you'd taken care of me and Sarah in your will. You said we'd be okay no matter what happened." I had said that. In the raw grief following Robert's death, when I was trying to comfort 2 young people who'd just lost their grandfather figure, I had assured them that they would be provided for. But I'd never imagined that Marcus would interpret those words as a guarantee, a contract that could never be broken regardless of his behavior. "Marcus, sit down, please. Let's discuss this calmly." "I don't want to sit down." He began pacing again, running his hands through his dark hair. "Do you have any idea what this means for me? I've been counting on that money, Grandma. I've made plans. I've told people." "You've told people about my life insurance policy?" He stopped pacing and looked at me like I'd asked something ridiculous. "Well, yeah, my friends, Cassie. Some business contacts I've been networking with. When you're trying to start a company, people want to know you have backing." I told them my grandmother was going to help me get started. The room started spinning. Not only had Marcus been discussing my private financial information with his mother, he'd been spreading it around to friends and business acquaintances. He'd been using my death benefit as some kind of credential, proof that he had access to capital. "Marcus, you had absolutely no right to discuss my personal financial information with anyone outside this family. It's not just your information anymore, Grandma. It's mine too. I'm your beneficiary. That money is part of my future plans." "Not anymore. It isn't." The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but I was too angry to take them back. Marcus had just confirmed every suspicion I'd had about his motives. He wasn't just hoping for inheritance money. He was actively counting on it, planning his life around it, even using it to impress potential business partners. Marcus went completely still. "What do you mean, not anymore?" I mean, I've already changed my will and my life insurance beneficiaries. You're no longer listed on either document. For a moment, I thought he might faint. His face went from red to white in seconds, and he gripped the back of Robert's old recliner to steady himself. "You can't do that," he whispered. "I already have." But that's not fair. That money was supposed to be mine. Sarah doesn't even need it. Her parents have money. I'm the one who needs help getting started in life. Sarah's parents don't have nearly as much money as you think they do, I said. And even if they did, need isn't the only factor in deciding who inherits my assets. Then what is? What did I do wrong? The question hung in the air between us. Marcus genuinely seemed confused about why I'd removed him from my will. In his mind, apparently, asking when I planned to die so he could access my money was perfectly reasonable behavior. "Marcus, you asked me when I expected to die so you could collect insurance money. You knew the exact amount of my policy. You've been discussing my finances with friends and strangers. You've made it clear that you view me primarily as a source of funding for your dreams. That's not true. I love you, Grandma." Love isn't just a word, Marcus. It's shown through actions, and your actions have told me that you're more interested in my money than in my well-being. He stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly his expression shifted. The anger faded, replaced by something that looked almost calculating. "Okay," he said quietly. "I get it. I messed up. I said some things that hurt your feelings, and I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Can we fix this?" The abrupt change in his tone set off alarm bells in my head. This didn't sound like genuine remorse. It sounded like strategy. Fix what exactly? The will, the insurance, everything. He sat down on the edge of the couch, leaning forward earnestly. "Grandma, I realize now how my words must have sounded. I was being immature and thoughtless. But I can change. I can be better. Just tell me what you need me to do." I studied his face, looking for signs of sincerity, but all I saw was the same calculating expression he'd worn when he'd pitched his business idea with Cassie. This wasn't remorse. This was damage control. "Marcus, changing behavior takes time. It's not something you can fix with an apology and a promise. But I can prove it to you. Give me a chance. Put me back in the will on a probationary basis or something if I mess up again. Take me out permanently. But don't punish me forever for one mistake." One mistake. He was characterizing weeks of inappropriate behavior, discussions with friends about my private finances, and treating me like a walking ATM as one mistake. "I need time to think about this," I said. "How much time?" The urgency in his voice confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't about rebuilding our relationship. This was about getting back access to my money as quickly as possible. "I don't know, Marcus. Weeks, months, maybe longer." His face fell. "But Grandma, I need to know where I stand. I've got business opportunities that won't wait months. I've got people expecting me to have access to capital." And there it was. The real reason for his sudden apology and promises to change. Marcus had apparently committed to business ventures based on his expectation of receiving my life insurance money. Now that I'd removed him from the policy, he was in a panic about disappointing investors or partners who thought he had financial backing. "Marcus, you should never have made commitments based on money you didn't have." "But I did have it. It was in your will." "You had an expectation, not a guarantee. There's a difference." He stood up abruptly, the mask of contrition slipping completely. "This is insane, Grandma. You're ruining my life over a few careless words. I'm protecting my assets from someone who's proven they can't be trusted with knowledge of them." "Can't be trusted?" "I'm your grandson." "Yes, you are. And that's what makes this so heartbreaking." For a moment, something flickered across Marcus's face that might have been genuine emotion, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Fine," he said coldly. "But don't expect me to keep pretending everything is normal between us. If you want to treat me like a stranger, I'll act like one." He strode toward the door, then turned back. "And don't expect me to keep checking on your health or visiting you all the time. Why should I care about someone who clearly doesn't care about my future?" With that parting shot, he slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood in my living room, surrounded by the photos and mementos of our family life, feeling like I'd just witnessed the death of something precious. But underneath the sadness was a growing sense of validation. Marcus's reaction to being removed from my will had revealed his true character more clearly than anything else could have. He wasn't upset about damaging our relationship. He was upset about losing access to my money. His threats to stop caring about my health weren't emotional outbursts. They were calculated punishments designed to make me feel guilty and change my mind. I called Margaret immediately. "How did he find out about the changes?" she asked after I'd recounted the confrontation. Linda told him. Despite my attempts to handle this discreetly, she shared our conversation with him. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison. I know you were hoping to avoid this kind of drama." Marcus mentioned that he's told friends and business contacts about my life insurance policy. He's apparently been using my death benefit as some kind of proof that he has access to capital for business ventures. There was a pause. That's concerning on multiple levels. Not only is it a violation of your privacy, but it suggests he may have made financial commitments based on money he doesn't actually have. That's exactly what I was thinking. And now that I've removed him from the policy, he's panicking about disappointing these people. Mrs. Morrison, I want you to be very careful over the next few weeks. When people are facing financial embarrassment or the collapse of business plans, they sometimes become desperate. Desperate people don't always make rational decisions. You think Marcus might try something? I think Marcus might escalate his efforts to pressure you into changing your mind. He might also try to involve other family members in pressuring you. And if he's made commitments to business partners based on your money, they might start pressuring him, which could lead to him pressuring you. Margaret's words sent a chill through me. I'd been thinking of this as a family dispute, but if Marcus had involved outside parties, the situation could become much more complicated. What should I do? Document everything. Keep records of all conversations, visits, phone calls. If anyone makes threats or tries to pressure you inappropriately, we need evidence. And consider being more selective about when and how you're accessible to family members. You mean don't let Marcus in the house? I mean be strategic about contact. If he wants to visit, maybe suggest meeting in public places. If he calls and becomes aggressive, don't hesitate to end the conversation. You don't owe anyone access to you, even family members. After hanging up with Margaret, I sat in my kitchen and thought about what she'd said. The idea of treating Marcus like a potential threat felt surreal. This was the little boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, the teenager I'd picked up from soccer practice, the young man I'd planned to help launch into adulthood, but the person who'd stood in my living room an hour ago wasn't that boy anymore. He was someone who saw me as an obstacle between him and money he felt entitled to. That evening, Linda called. Her voice was tight with anger before she even said hello. "Mom, what have you done?" "I've made decisions about my own assets, Linda. Marcus is devastated. He came over here crying, saying you've cut him out of your will completely. How could you do that to your own grandson? How could I protect my assets from someone who's proven he can't be trusted with knowledge of them?" Pretty easily, actually. Marcus made one thoughtless comment, and you're destroying his future over it. It wasn't one comment, Linda. It was a pattern of behavior that showed me he views me primarily as a source of money. And you contributed to that by discussing my private finances with him. I was trying to reassure him about college funding. I thought it was nice that you'd included him in your will. Well, now you can reassure him that his college funding will need to come from other sources. Linda was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Less angry, more calculating. "Mom, I think you're making this decision while you're upset. Maybe we should all sit down together and talk this through. Marcus is willing to apologize properly. He's young, and he made a mistake. But that doesn't mean he should be punished forever. This isn't a punishment, Linda. It's a consequence. There's a difference. But the consequences are so severe. $500,000, Mom. That's life-changing money for a young person. Yes, it is, which is exactly why it should go to someone who values me as a person, not as a payout. Marcus does value you. He's just young, and sometimes says things without thinking. Linda, your son knew the exact amount of my life insurance policy. He'd discussed it with friends and business contacts. He'd made plans based on accessing that money after my death. That's not youthful thoughtlessness, that's calculated behavior. Another pause. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Have you told Sarah about these changes? The question caught me off guard. Why do you ask? I just wonder if she knows she's now getting everything. I wonder if she had any influence on your decision. I felt my temper flare. Are you suggesting that Sarah manipulated me into changing my will? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just asking if she knows. Sarah doesn't know about the changes, and she had nothing to do with my decision. I made this choice based entirely on Marcus's behavior and attitude. But she's going to benefit significantly from his mistakes. She's going to benefit from being a loving, respectful granddaughter who's never asked me inappropriate questions about my mortality or discussed my finances with strangers. Linda sighed heavily. Mom, I think you need to reconsider this. Marcus has learned his lesson. And frankly, removing one grandchild from your will while leaving everything to the other one is going to create family problems that will last long after you're gone. Then maybe Marcus should have thought about that before he decided to treat me like a business opportunity. That's not fair, and you know it. What's not fair is an 18-year-old asking his grandmother when she expects to die so he can collect insurance money. What's not fair is that same grandson telling friends and business contacts about my private financial information. What's not fair is you defending his behavior instead of addressing it. I'm not defending. Yes, you are. You've been making excuses for him since this whole thing started. And that tells me you don't fully understand how inappropriate his behavior has been. We ended the call without resolution, just like our previous conversation. But this time, Linda had revealed something important. She was worried about family dynamics after my death. She understood that removing Marcus from my will while leaving everything to Sarah would create long-term resentment and conflict. But rather than addressing the root cause, Marcus's behavior, she wanted me to change my decision to avoid future family problems. I wasn't interested in managing future family dynamics. I was interested in making sure my assets went to someone who deserved them. The next few days were blissfully quiet. No calls from Marcus, no visits, no text messages asking about my health. Linda didn't call either, though I suspected she was strategizing about how to approach me next. Sometimes silence was more ominous than conflict, but I tried to enjoy the peace while it lasted. On Thursday afternoon, I was reading in my garden when a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. Two men in expensive suits got out and walked toward my front door. They looked official. Government officials or lawyers or insurance investigators. My heart started racing as I wondered what kind of trouble Marcus might have gotten himself into. I met them at the front door before they could ring the bell. Mrs. Morrison? The older man, probably in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes, extended his hand. I'm David Chen, and this is my associate, James Rodriguez. We're business consultants, and we were hoping to speak with you for a few minutes. Business consultants? What kind of business? We understand you have a grandson who's interested in starting a technology company. We've been working with him on some preliminary planning, and he mentioned that you might be interested in learning more about investment opportunities in the startup space. My blood ran cold. Marcus had sent business consultants to my house to pitch me on investing in his company. He wasn't taking no for an answer. He was escalating his efforts by bringing in professionals. I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in any investment opportunities, I said firmly. We completely understand your caution, David said smoothly. Investing in startups can seem risky, especially for people who aren't familiar with the technology sector. That's why we wanted to meet with you personally, to explain how we minimize risk while maximizing potential returns. Gentlemen, I appreciate you taking the time to drive out here, but I'm not interested. Please tell my grandson that I won't be funding his business venture. James stepped forward. Mrs. Morrison, we're not just talking about funding Marcus's company. We're talking about a diversified portfolio of technology investments that could significantly increase your overall wealth while providing capital for promising young entrepreneurs. They weren't just asking me to fund Marcus. They were trying to sell me on a broader investment strategy. But I could see through the pitch. This was Marcus's way of trying to access my money through a back door. If I invested with their firm, he'd probably find a way to benefit from those investments. I'm not interested, I repeated. And I'd appreciate it if you'd leave my property now. David's smile never wavered. Of course. But before we go, Could I ask, are you the sole decision maker regarding your investment portfolio? Sometimes families make these kinds of decisions together. I am the sole decision maker regarding my assets, I said coldly, and my decision is no. After they left, I immediately called Margaret. Marcus sent business consultants to my house, I said without preamble. They tried to pitch me on investing in startup companies. He's definitely escalating. Did they make any threats or use any high-pressure tactics? No threats, but they asked whether I was the sole decision maker regarding my investments. It felt like they were fishing for information about my family situation. That's concerning. It sounds like Marcus may have told them you're elderly and possibly susceptible to family pressure. They might be trying to figure out if there are other family members they could approach to influence you. What should I do? First, document this visit. Write down their names, what company they claim to represent, exactly what they said. Second, be extra cautious about any unexpected visitors or phone calls. Third, consider whether you want to increase security measures at your home. Security measures? Like what? Camera doorbells, security systems, anything that would create a record if people come to your house uninvited. I know it sounds paranoid, but when money is involved, people sometimes behave in ways you wouldn't expect. After hanging up with Margaret, I sat in my kitchen feeling violated. Marcus had given strangers my address and sent them to my home to pressure me about money. He'd shared enough personal information about me for them to craft their pitch around my age and family situation. The little boy I'd raised had become someone who was willing to invade my privacy and peace of mind to get what he wanted. That evening, I called a security company and scheduled an installation for the next week. I also called my bank and set up additional security measures on my accounts. If Marcus was escalating his efforts to access my money, I needed to be prepared for whatever came next. Friday morning brought another surprise. I was having coffee when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the window, I could see Cassie, Marcus's girlfriend, walking toward my front door. She was alone this time, and she looked nervous. When I answered her knock, she gave me a shaky smile. "Hi, Mrs. Morrison. I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I wanted to talk to you about Marcus." "What about Marcus?" "Can I come in, please? I think there are some things you should know." Against my better judgment, I let her into my living room. She perched on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you to know that I had no idea Marcus had told those business guys about your insurance money. He told me he'd talked to you about investing in our company, but he never said he'd given them your address or sent them here." "But you knew about the life insurance policy?" She nodded miserably. "He told me when we first started dating. He said his grandmother was really generous and had set aside money to help him get started in life. I thought it was sweet." "And when did you realize it wasn't quite that simple?" "When you said no to our business loan request." Marcus completely lost it. He started talking about how the money was supposed to be his, how you'd promised it to him, how you were ruining his life by changing your mind. Cassie took a shaky breath. "Mrs. Morrison, I've been dating Marcus for 6 months, and I've never seen him like this. He's obsessed with getting that money back. He talks about it constantly. He's barely sleeping, barely eating. He's alienated most of his friends by asking them to call you and put in good words for him." "He's asked friends to call me?" "Yeah, but I think most of them said no. They thought it was weird and inappropriate. At least some of Marcus's friends had better judgment than he did." "Cassie, why are you telling me this?" She looked down at her hands. "Because I think you should know that Marcus isn't handling this well. And because I think you deserve to know what he's been saying about you." "What has he been saying?" "He's been telling people that you're getting senile and that his mom needs to intervene before you make any more bad decisions about money. He's also been saying that your other granddaughter is manipulating you and turning you against him." The words hit me like physical blows. Marcus was spreading rumors about my mental competency and Sarah's character. He was laying groundwork to challenge my will or have my decision-making capacity questioned. Has he said anything about contesting my will or challenging my mental competency? Cassie looked uncomfortable. "He's mentioned talking to lawyers about his options. He seems to think that if he can prove you weren't thinking clearly when you changed your will, he might be able to get it reversed." I felt the ground shifting under my feet. Marcus wasn't just upset about losing his inheritance. He was actively plotting to regain it through legal challenges. And he was trying to destroy my reputation and Sarah's in the process. Cassie, I appreciate you telling me this, but I have to ask, why are you sharing this information with me instead of supporting your boyfriend? She was quiet for a long moment. Because this isn't the person I thought I was dating. The Marcus I fell for was ambitious and driven, but he was also kind and respectful. This version of Marcus, the one who's obsessed with his grandmother's money and willing to say terrible things about her to get it back. I don't recognize him. Are you breaking up with him? I think so. I can't be with someone who treats family the way he's been treating you. And I can't be part of a business that's built on inheritance money instead of hard work and good ideas. After Cassie left, I called Margaret immediately. He's planning to challenge my mental competency, I said. And he's spreading rumors about my cognitive abilities to lay the groundwork. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Morrison. Do you have any proof? His girlfriend just told me. She said he's been telling people I'm getting senile and that he's talked to lawyers about his options. Okay, here's what we need to do. First, I want you to schedule a comprehensive cognitive evaluation with your doctor. If Marcus tries to challenge your mental competency, we'll need medical documentation that you were fully capable of making these decisions. Will that be enough? It should be, especially since you made these changes so recently and there are clear reasons for them. But we should also consider having witnesses to your mental clarity. People who can testify that you've been sharp, articulate, and capable of managing your own affairs. I thought about my book club friends, my neighbors, the volunteers I worked with at the community center. All of them could attest to my mental clarity and decision-making abilities. Margaret, what are the chances Marcus could successfully challenge my will? Honestly, pretty low, especially with the documentation we have about his behavior and the reasons for your decisions. But will contests can be messy and expensive, even when they're unsuccessful. And they can tie up assets for months or years while they're being resolved. The thought of my assets being frozen in legal limbo while Marcus fought for money he didn't deserve made me feel sick. But it also made me more determined than ever to protect what Robert and I had built together. What can I do to make my will as challenge-proof as possible? We can add more detailed explanations of your reasons for the changes. We can also include provisions that anyone who contests the will forfeits any right to inherit anything, even small bequests. That's called a no-contest clause, and it discourages frivolous challenges. Do it. All of it. There's one more thing we should consider. If Marcus is spreading rumors about your mental competency, he might also be trying to influence other family members to support his position. Has Linda been in contact with you since your last conversation? No, but I suspect she's planning something. Be prepared for coordinated pressure from multiple family members. And if anyone suggests that you need help managing your affairs, or that you should give someone power of attorney, be very cautious. You think they might try to take control of my finances? I think desperate people do desperate things. And if Marcus has convinced Linda that you're not thinking clearly, she might genuinely believe she's helping by trying to intervene. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every car that drove down my street made me wonder if it was stopping at my house. Marcus's behavior had escalated from inappropriate questions to business pressure to spreading rumors about my mental health. What would come next? The answer came the following morning. I was making breakfast when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Linda standing on my porch with a woman I didn't recognize. They both looked serious and official. I opened the door cautiously. Linda, what are you doing here? Mom, this is Dr. Patricia Williams. She's a geriatric specialist, and I've asked her to speak with you about some concerns Marcus and I have been having. Dr. Williams stepped forward with a professional smile. Mrs. Morrison, your daughter asked me to conduct an informal wellness check. She's concerned that you may be experiencing some cognitive changes that are affecting your judgment. I stared at them in disbelief. Linda had brought a doctor to my house to evaluate my mental competency without my consent or knowledge. This wasn't just family pressure. This was an ambush. I don't need a wellness check, I said firmly. And I certainly don't need one conducted without my permission in my own home. Mom, please, Linda said. Just talk to Dr. Williams for a few minutes. She's not here to upset you. We're just worried about some of the decisions you've been making lately. Decisions like protecting my assets from a grandson who asked when I expected to die so he could collect insurance money. Dr. Williams looked confused. I was told you'd been making uncharacteristic financial decisions and showing signs of paranoia about family members. And who told you that? Linda shifted uncomfortably. Mom, Marcus is really worried about you. We all are. These sudden changes to your will, the suspicion of family members who love you, the refusal to consider reasonable investment opportunities? Reasonable investment opportunities? Is that what we're calling it when strangers show up at my door trying to sell me startup investments? Dr. Williams looked even more confused. I think there may be some miscommunication here. Perhaps I should leave and let you discuss this privately. That would be best, I said. And Dr. Williams, before you accept any more referrals from my daughter, you might want to get the full story about the situation. After the doctor left, Linda and I faced each other across my front doorway. Mom, that was embarrassing. Dr. Williams is going to think our family is dysfunctional. Our family is dysfunctional, Linda. Your son treats me like a walking ATM. You enable his behavior. And now you're trying to have my mental competency evaluated without my consent. I'm trying to help you. Marcus showed me the messages you've been sending him. You've been erratic and accusatory. You're seeing conspiracies where there aren't any. What messages? I haven't been sending Marcus any messages. Linda pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages allegedly from my number. They were rambling, paranoid, and completely unlike anything I would ever write. Someone had been sending messages to Marcus pretending to be me, and these messages made me sound confused and unstable. Linda, I didn't send any of these messages. Mom, they came from your phone number. I don't care what number they came from. I didn't write them. For the first time, Linda looked uncertain. But if you didn't send them, who did? The answer was obvious, but I could see that Linda wasn't ready to accept it yet. Think about it, Linda. Who benefits from making me look mentally unstable? Who's been telling people I'm getting senile? Who's been talking to lawyers about challenging my will? Linda's face went pale as the implications sank in. You? Think Marcus sent those messages himself? I think Marcus is willing to do whatever it takes to get access to my money, including making me look incompetent and manipulating you into supporting his efforts. Linda stared at the phone screen, rereading the messages with new understanding. But why would he do that? He's not that kind of person. Apparently he is, and apparently $500,000 is enough to bring out the worst in him. Linda left without saying goodbye, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. For the first time, she was beginning to question Marcus's version of events and consider the possibility that her son wasn't the victim in this situation. But I knew this wasn't over. If anything, Marcus would probably escalate further now that his manipulation attempt had been exposed. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. That afternoon, I drove to my doctor's office and requested a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. I also asked Dr. Martinez to document my mental clarity and decision-making capacity in my medical records. If Marcus wanted to challenge my competency, I'd make sure there was plenty of evidence to refute his claims. As I sat in the waiting room, I thought about how much my life had changed in just a few weeks. A month ago, my biggest worry was whether to plant tulips or daffodils in my spring garden. Now I was documenting my mental competency to protect myself from my own grandson's legal challenges. But underneath the sadness and betrayal, I felt something else. Resolve. Marcus had underestimated me if he thought I'd simply roll over and give him access to my money because he'd applied enough pressure. I'd survived widowhood, poverty, and decades of hard work to build the security I now enjoyed. I wasn't about to let an entitled teenager destroy what Robert and I had created together. The war for my assets was just beginning, and Marcus was about to learn that his grandmother was a much more formidable opponent than he'd anticipated. The cognitive evaluation results came back 3 days later, and Dr. Martinez called personally to deliver the news. Mrs. Morrison, your test scores are excellent across all categories: memory, reasoning, problem-solving, judgment. Everything is well within normal ranges for someone your age. In fact, some of your scores are above average. Can you put that in writing, Dr. Martinez? I may need official documentation. Of course. Is everything all right? You seemed concerned about this evaluation. Family issues. Some people are questioning my decision-making capacity because they don't like my recent choices about my estate. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment. I see. Well, I can state unequivocally that you show no signs of cognitive impairment, dementia, or any condition that would affect your ability to make sound financial decisions. I'll have a formal report prepared by tomorrow. Armed with medical documentation of my mental competency, I felt more confident about facing whatever Marcus planned next. I didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, my doorbell rang just as I was settling down with a book. Through the security camera I'd had installed, I could see Marcus standing on my porch with two people I didn't recognize, a middle-aged man in a suit and a woman with a briefcase. I spoke through the intercom system. Marcus, it's late. What do you want? Grandma, I brought some people who can help us resolve this situation. Can we come in and talk? Who are the people with you? This is attorney Mitchell Barnes and social worker Janet Pierce. They specialize in elder care issues. My blood ran cold. Marcus had brought a lawyer and a social worker to my house, the kind of team that gets involved when families are seeking guardianship or conservatorship over elderly relatives. I don't need elder care assistance, Marcus. Please leave. Grandma, we're all concerned about you. The erratic text messages, the sudden changes to your will, the paranoia about family members. These could be signs of early dementia. We just want to make sure you're getting the help you need. I turned on my porch light and studied the three figures through the camera. The attorney looked legitimate, but something seemed off about the social worker. Her clothes were wrinkled, her briefcase looked cheap, and she kept checking her phone like she had somewhere else to be. Marcus, can you have the social worker show her credentials to the camera? There was some shuffling and whispered conversation. Then the woman held up what looked like an ID badge, but it was too far away and poorly lit for me to read clearly. I called my neighbor Helen, who lived next door. Helen, can you do me a favor? Look out your front window and tell me what you see in my driveway. Oh my Betty. There are 3 people on your porch, and they don't look very official to me. The woman looks like she might be one of those actresses from the community theater. Community theater! I should have known. Marcus had hired actors to pose as professionals to make his intervention seem more legitimate. I turned the intercom back on. Marcus, I know these people aren't real professionals. If you don't leave my property immediately, I'm calling the police. Grandma, you're being paranoid again. These people are here to help you. Then they won't mind showing proper identification to the police when they arrive. That did it. The fake social worker was already heading back to their car before I finished speaking. The supposed attorney followed quickly behind her. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then jogged after them. I immediately called the police to report the incident, then called Margaret to document what had happened. He hired actors to impersonate professionals? Margaret sounded incredulous. It appears so. My neighbor confirmed they didn't look legitimate, and they fled as soon as I mentioned calling the police. This is harassment, Mrs. Morrison. You could file charges. I want to document it, but I'm not sure filing charges would help the situation. Actually, it might. If Marcus is planning to challenge your will or your competency, having a police report showing his escalating harassment could be very useful in court. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the Maplewood Police Department. Officer Sarah Chen, who took my statement, was sympathetic and thorough. Mrs. Morrison, this isn't the first case we've seen where family members try to pressure elderly relatives about inheritance matters. Your grandson's behavior is definitely crossing legal lines. What kind of lines? Harassment, intimidation, possibly fraud if he's misrepresenting professionals. We'll document everything and have a talk with him about appropriate boundaries. 2 hours later, Marcus called. His voice was shaking with rage. Grandma, the police just came to my apartment. You called the cops on your own grandson? I called the police because you brought fake professionals to my house to pressure me about my mental health. That's harassment, Marcus. They weren't fake. I hired them through a legitimate agency. What kind of legitimate agency provides actors to pose as social workers and attorneys? Silence. Marcus, This has gone far enough. I want you to stop contacting me, stop sending people to my house, and stop spreading rumors about my mental health." "I can't do that, Grandma. Too much is at stake." "What do you mean, too much is at stake?" "I mean, I've already committed to business deals based on that inheritance money. I've signed contracts, made promises to investors. If I can't deliver the capital I promised, I could face serious legal problems." There it was. Marcus hadn't just been counting on my money for startup dreams. He'd actually committed it to business ventures before he even had access to it. He'd essentially spent my life insurance money while I was still alive. Marcus, that's fraud. You can't commit money you don't have to business deals. It's not fraud if I was supposed to inherit it. You changed the rules after I'd already made commitments. I didn't change any rules. I made a decision about my own assets based on your inappropriate behavior. This is insane, Grandma. You're destroying my entire future over a few questions about your health. I'm protecting my assets from someone who's proven they can't be trusted with them. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more calculated. "Grandma, I really hope you'll reconsider this decision. Because if you don't, I'm going to have to explore other options." "What kind of other options?" "Legal options. I've been talking to lawyers about challenging your competency and the validity of your recent will changes. I think a judge would be very interested to hear about your erratic behavior, your paranoid accusations against family members, and your sudden decision to disinherit a grandchild you've loved for 18 years. The threat was clear: restore his inheritance or face a legal battle. Marcus, I've already had a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. My doctor has certified that I'm mentally competent and capable of making my own decisions. One doctor's opinion won't necessarily convince a judge, especially when there's evidence of erratic behavior and family testimony about concerning changes in your personality." "Family testimony? You mean lies from you and your mother?" "I mean concerned observations from people who love you and are worried about your well-being." I hung up and immediately called Margaret. "He's definitely planning to challenge the will," I told her, "and he's threatening to have my competency evaluated by the court. Then we need to be ready for him. I'm going to have you evaluated by 3 different specialists: a neurologist, a geriatric psychiatrist, and a clinical psychologist. We'll also get statements from people who interact with you regularly about your mental clarity and decision-making abilities." Over the next week, I underwent the most thorough mental health evaluation of my life. Every test confirmed what I already knew. I was sharp, competent, and fully capable of managing my own affairs. Margaret also collected statements from my book club friends, my neighbors, my doctor, and the volunteers I worked with at the community center. Everyone attested to my mental clarity and sound judgment. But Marcus wasn't giving up. 3 days after my final evaluation, Linda called with a proposal. "Mom, I've been thinking about this whole situation, and I have an idea that might work for everyone." "I'm listening." "What if we set up a trust for Marcus that pays out gradually over time, instead of all at once? That way, he gets the financial help he needs, but there are safeguards in place to make sure the money is used responsibly." It wasn't a terrible idea, but it missed the fundamental point. "Linda, this isn't about the structure of the inheritance. It's about Marcus's attitude toward me and my money. Setting up a trust doesn't address the fact that he asked when I expected to die so he could collect insurance money. But it shows you're willing to compromise to find a solution that works for everyone. I'm not interested in compromising with someone who's hired fake professionals to question my mental health and threaten to challenge my competency in court." "Mom, Marcus is desperate. He's made commitments based on that inheritance money, and if he can't fulfill them, he could face serious consequences." "Then Marcus should have thought about that before he committed money he didn't have. You're being stubborn and vindictive. This could destroy his entire future." "His behavior destroyed his future, Linda. I'm just refusing to fix the consequences for him." That weekend, Sarah came to visit as promised. She arrived Friday evening with a bag of groceries and a warm hug, completely unaware of the family drama that had been unfolding. "Grandma, you look tired. Everything okay?" I'd planned to keep the details from Sarah, not wanting to burden her with family problems. But looking at her concerned face, I realized she deserved to know what was happening. I told her everything. Marcus's inappropriate questions, the business consultants, the fake professionals, the threats of legal action. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more shocked with each revelation. "I can't believe he asked when you expected to die," she said finally. "That's horrible, Grandma." "It was a shock, certainly. And he's been telling people you're getting senile? That's not just inappropriate, it's cruel. I'm afraid your cousin has shown me a side of himself I never knew existed." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing everything I'd told her. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did you change your will because of what Marcus did? Or were you planning to do it anyway?" It was a fair question, and Sarah deserved an honest answer. I changed it entirely because of Marcus's behavior. If he'd continued treating me with love and respect, he would have remained a beneficiary. So if he apologized and changed his behavior, would you consider changing it back? I thought about this carefully. At this point, I don't think I could trust his motives for apologizing. He's made it clear that his primary concern is accessing my money, not maintaining our relationship. That's really sad. Yes, it is. But it's also clarifying. I'd rather leave my assets to someone who values me as a person than someone who sees me as a payout. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Grandma. And I'm sorry Marcus has acted so badly. It's not your fault, sweetheart. I know, but we're family. His behavior reflects on all of us." That evening, Sarah helped me cook dinner, and we spent the night watching old movies and talking about everything except Marcus and inheritance money. It reminded me why I'd made the decision I had. Sarah wanted to spend time with me because she enjoyed my company, not because she was monitoring my health or calculating her potential inheritance. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was having coffee with Sarah when the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I could see a woman in her 40s wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase. "Mrs. Morrison? I'm Detective Lisa Park with the Vermont State Police. Could I speak with you about some concerns that have been raised regarding your welfare?" My heart sank. Marcus had apparently escalated to state authorities. I invited Detective Park in and introduced her to Sarah. She declined coffee but accepted a seat at my kitchen table. "Mrs. Morrison, we received a report that you may be the victim of elder abuse or exploitation. The person who filed the report expressed concerns about your mental health and suggested that someone might be manipulating you into making financial decisions that aren't in your best interest." "Who filed the report?" "I can't share that information, but I can tell you that the person claimed to be a concerned family member." Sarah spoke up. "Detective, my grandmother is one of the sharpest people I know. She's been handling her own finances successfully for decades. I appreciate that, but I still need to conduct a welfare check. It's standard procedure when these kinds of reports are filed." For the next hour, Detective Park asked me detailed questions about my health, my living situation, my financial management, and my recent decisions about my estate. She also asked about my relationship with various family members and whether anyone had been pressuring me about money. I told her the truth about everything: Marcus's inappropriate questions, his spreading rumors about my mental health, his threats to challenge my will, and his escalating harassment. I also showed her the documentation from my recent cognitive evaluations. Detective Park reviewed everything carefully, then closed her notebook. "Mrs. Morrison, based on my interview and the medical documentation you've provided, I see no evidence of elder abuse, exploitation, or diminished capacity. You appear to be fully competent and capable of making your own decisions. Will you be filing a report?" "Yes, and I'll note that the welfare check revealed no concerns about your well-being or decision-making capacity. I'll also note that there appears to be a family dispute about inheritance matters, but that doesn't constitute elder abuse." After Detective Park left, Sarah and I sat in stunned silence. "I can't believe Marcus called the state police," Sarah said finally. "I can. He's determined to get that inheritance money, and he's willing to use any tactic to pressure me into changing my mind. What happens now?" "Now we wait to see what he tries next." We didn't have to wait long. Monday morning, Margaret called with news. "Mrs. Morrison, Marcus has filed a petition with the probate court requesting an emergency hearing to determine your mental competency and challenging the validity of your recent will changes. My stomach dropped. How is that possible? I just had a police welfare check that found no problems. Family members can petition the court for competency hearings even if other agencies have found no issues. Marcus is claiming that you're suffering from diminished capacity that affects your judgment about financial matters. What happens next? We'll get a court date probably within the next few weeks. You'll need to appear before a judge and demonstrate your competency. The judge may also order an independent evaluation. Will Marcus be there? Yes, and possibly Linda as well. They'll present their evidence that you're not competent to manage your affairs or make decisions about your estate. What kind of evidence? Probably testimony about your recent behavior, the changes to your will, and any other incidents they can point to as signs of diminished capacity. I thought about the fake text messages, the accusations of paranoia, the claims that I was being manipulated. Marcus had been laying the groundwork for this challenge for weeks. Margaret, what are our chances? Very good, based on the medical evidence and documentation we have. But court proceedings can be unpredictable, and judges sometimes err on the side of caution when it comes to protecting elderly people from potential exploitation. You mean the judge might side with Marcus, even if there's no real evidence of incompetency? It's possible, especially if Marcus and Linda present a compelling narrative about a grandmother who's changed dramatically and is making irrational decisions about money. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Margaret spent that time preparing our case, gathering additional medical evidence, and coaching me on what to expect in court. Remember, she said during one of our preparation sessions, the burden of proof is on Marcus. He has to convince the judge that you're not competent. We just have to show that you are. What if he brings up the fake text messages, or the business consultant incident? We'll explain exactly what happened and show how those incidents actually demonstrate Marcus's inappropriate behavior, not your incompetency. The day of the hearing arrived gray and rainy, fitting my mood perfectly. Sarah had driven up from college to support me, and we met Margaret at the courthouse an hour before the scheduled time. "How are you feeling?" Margaret asked as we reviewed our materials one final time. "Nervous, but ready," I said. "I know I'm competent, and I know my reasons for changing my will were sound. That's all we need to prove." When we entered the courtroom, I saw Marcus sitting at a table with his attorney, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. Linda was there too, along with 2 people I didn't recognize, probably experts or witnesses Marcus planned to call. Judge Patricia Coleman was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and kind but serious eyes. She reviewed the petition and supporting documents before calling the hearing to order. This is a petition filed by Marcus Morrison seeking a determination that his grandmother, Elizabeth Morrison, lacks the mental capacity to manage her financial affairs and make decisions regarding her estate. Mr. Barnes, you may present your case. Marcus's attorney stood and delivered an opening statement that painted me as a previously generous grandmother who had suddenly become paranoid, erratic, and susceptible to outside influence. She claimed that my recent decisions were completely out of character and suggested that someone was manipulating me into disinheriting Marcus. Then Marcus took the stand. Under oath, he testified that I'd become increasingly confused and forgetful over the past year. He claimed that I'd sent him threatening and incoherent text messages, accused family members of conspiracies, and made irrational decisions about money. He even suggested that Sarah might be manipulating me to increase her own inheritance. It was a convincing performance, and if I hadn't lived through the actual events, I might have believed him myself. Linda testified next, supporting Marcus's claims about my changed behavior and expressing concern about my welfare. She presented the fake text messages as evidence of my deteriorating mental state and suggested that I needed protection from people who might take advantage of me. Then Margaret began our defense. She called Dr. Martinez first, who testified about my excellent cognitive evaluation results and stated unequivocally that I showed no signs of dementia or diminished capacity. The neurologist and geriatric psychiatrist who had evaluated me provided similar testimony, each confirming that my mental faculties were completely intact. Then Margaret called my character witnesses, neighbors, friends, and volunteers, who could attest to my sharp mind and sound judgment. Each person testified that I was articulate, logical, and fully capable of managing my own affairs. Finally, it was my turn to testify. Margaret walked me through the events that had led to my decision to change my will, starting with Marcus's question about when I expected to die. "Mrs. Morrison," Margaret said, "can you explain to the court why you decided to remove Marcus from your will? My grandson asked me when I expected to die so he could collect my life insurance money. He knew the exact amount of the policy and had discussed it with friends and business contacts. He treated me like a business opportunity rather than a beloved family member. Did anyone pressure you to make this decision?" "No one pressured me. If anything, family members have been pressuring me to change it back." "Are you certain this was the right decision?" "Absolutely. I want my assets to go to someone who values me as a person, not as a payout." Marcus's attorney cross-examined me aggressively, trying to paint my concerns as paranoid delusions and my decisions as irrational. But I remained calm and factual, explaining each incident clearly and logically. When she asked about the text messages, I explained that I hadn't sent them and suspected they were fabricated to make me appear incompetent. "Mrs. Morrison, isn't it possible that you sent those messages and simply don't remember?" "No, it's not possible. I've never written anything like those messages in my life, and I certainly wouldn't send threatening texts to my own grandson. But if you were experiencing memory problems, you might not remember sending them." "I'm not experiencing memory problems, as multiple medical evaluations have confirmed." After closing arguments, Judge Coleman recessed to consider her decision. Sarah, Margaret, and I waited in the hallway for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. When court reconvened, Judge Coleman delivered her ruling. "After reviewing all the evidence and testimony presented today, I find that Mrs. Elizabeth Morrison is mentally competent and fully capable of managing her own financial affairs and making decisions regarding her estate." Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I had to grip the table to steady myself. "The medical evidence clearly demonstrates that Mrs. Morrison has no cognitive impairment," the judge continued. "Her testimony was lucid, logical, and consistent. Her reasons for changing her will, while perhaps hurtful to some family members, are rational and well-founded." She turned to look directly at Marcus. "Mr. Morrison, I understand your disappointment about losing your inheritance, but that does not give you grounds to challenge your grandmother's mental competency. Mrs. Morrison has every right to leave her assets to whomever she chooses, for whatever reasons she deems appropriate." The judge then addressed the broader family dynamics. "This court encourages families to resolve inheritance disputes through communication and understanding rather than litigation. However, once an individual has made clear, competent decisions about their estate, those decisions should be respected." Case dismissed. As we left the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. Marcus had thrown everything he could at me: harassment, manipulation, fake professionals, false reports to authorities, and finally a court challenge, and I had prevailed. Marcus and Linda didn't speak to us as we left, but I could see the defeat in their faces. Marcus's last-ditch effort to regain his inheritance had failed spectacularly, and now there was a court record documenting his inappropriate behavior. That evening, Sarah and I celebrated with dinner at my favorite restaurant in town. As we talked over dessert, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Grandma, do you think you'll ever reconcile with Marcus?" I considered this carefully. "I'd like to think it's possible, but it would require him to genuinely understand why his behavior was wrong and make real changes in how he treats people. I don't see that happening anytime soon. It's really sad you loved him so much." "I still love him, Sarah, but love doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior or ignoring red flags about someone's character." 3 months later, I received a letter from Marcus. It was a genuine apology, not the strategic kind he'd tried before, but a real acknowledgement of how badly he'd behaved. He admitted that his focus on money had blinded him to the pain he was causing and that he was ashamed of the person he'd become. The letter was a good start, but rebuilding trust would take time and consistent, changed behavior. I wrote back, expressing appreciation for his apology, but making it clear that our relationship would need to be rebuilt slowly and carefully. A year later, Marcus and I have limited but cordial contact. He's working 2 jobs to pay off the debts he incurred from his failed business ventures, and he seems to have learned something about the value of earning rather than inheriting money. We exchange birthday cards and holiday greetings, but we're not close the way we once were. Sarah graduated summa cum laude and is now in her first year of law school, funded in part by a trust I established for her education. She visits regularly, calls to check on me because she genuinely cares about my well-being, and has never once asked about her inheritance. As for me, I'm living peacefully in my own home, managing my own affairs, and making my own decisions about my assets. The security cameras are still installed, but I rarely think about needing them anymore. Margaret has helped me create an ironclad estate plan that reflects my values and priorities. Most importantly, I learned that protecting yourself from family members who view you as a financial opportunity isn't cruel or vindictive. It's necessary. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones you need to protect yourself from. My money will go to someone who values me as a person, not as a payout. And that's exactly how it should be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.